does the United States make it past 2025? The United States we know today, like in 2020.
But the United States as a superpower, the United States as the only world superpower, I don't see that happening past 20.
Before we start this video, I want to let you guys know about our sponsor today, which is Noble Gold. Go to LouValentinoGold.com right now, get your free kit, and learn how to invest. If you're looking to invest your IRA, or if you're after an IRA, Noble Gold is offering you a free gold standard gold coin if you qualify. Right now, the stock market is plunging. Bitcoin is going down. A lot of different things are going up. The prices of gold are looking to double because of these new wars that are beginning to start. So investing has got you stressed. It's too complicated. Don't leave your money in the bank losing value. Invest in precious metals with LouValentinoGold.com. Get your Noble Gold. The call number on the screen. I hope you guys enjoy this video. All right, ladies and gentlemen, one of the biggest interviews I've ever done, and I have a special guest, man, Everyday Spy. I know that you guys have seen him in various podcasts, and you've seen his stuff before. But today I wanna get real political. And Andrew, welcome to the show, Andrew Bustamante. I want to make sure I get that correctly. Welcome to the show, man.
I appreciate it, man. You got it dead right. I'm super happy to be here, and yeah, I appreciate the invite, Lou.
All right, so and by getting political, so I know a lot of people want to get into the spy. Of course, how you obviously you served in our military before you got recruited. I definitely want to get to that. But there's just so much happening, right, with Israel, Hamas, and then Israel, Iran, and then Joe Biden and the United States situation. Of course, Trump trials happening as well. There's just so much happening. And I want to pick your brain because there was this movie that just came out. It's called Civil War, right? And then a movie previous to that was Leave the World Behind, produced by the Obamas. Now, I want to go right to Civil War because have you seen the movie?
I've not seen Civil War, but I did see Leave the World Behind.
Okay.
Well, I know what you're talking about, though.
But there's something going on, and I kind of want to pick your brain on this. There's something happening right now in Hollywood, and of course, people speak about predictive programming and all these different things. But is Hollywood benefiting of this? I don't know. I don't want to say fear mongering or this projection because I think it's deeper than what we're seeing. Are they benefiting? Are they becoming the benefiters of so much civil tension in America, right? When it comes to the left, the right, and like, what do you think? Why do you think these movies are taking place right before the election?
So first of all, your observation is exactly right. There's a bunch of entertainment activity happening right now that's very politically charged, right? Now, you kind of have to reverse engineer this though, man, because for something to be made into a movie, that process takes anywhere from like 24 to 36 months. So what you're really seeing is that the movies that are hitting right now, like Leave the World Behind, that's almost a year old, right? Civil War is relatively new. You have to go back in time 2 to 3 years to understand what the executives who actually purchased the rights to that movie were thinking. Well, what happened 2 to 3 years ago, right? Well, about 3.5 years ago is when you had the January 6th Capitol riots. So coming out of the January 6th Capitol riots, immediately after the Trump, when Trump was ousted and Biden took office, right? Immediately out of that, you basically had this idea of, oh my gosh, civil war is coming to the United States. Well, that is what in the entertainment industry, that's called a zeitgeist. It's like a passionate idea that spreads immediately. It was what was virality before social media ever existed. So what we're seeing now is actually all the movie ideas that were developed and produced 3 years ago, just now getting to screen. The difference is that, politically, we haven't changed much in the last 3 years. If anything, we saw like COVID happened, economic crisis happened, inflation happened, like all sorts of stuff got worse instead of getting better. So the same movies would have gone to air, even if the Biden administration would have been successful. But instead, the Biden administration had its own errors. You have Israel, Hamas, you have Israel, Iran, just like you said, and now these movies hit. So to answer your question in a word, absolutely, Hollywood is taking advantage of what's happening in the United States politically. But what they're doing is what they've always done. They're just riding a captivating storyline or a zeitgeist.
Now, for some reason, and I want to get your thoughts on this because, obviously you'll let me know if it's classified or not. But there's obviously something happening, a shift, right? That it does feel, and I don't know if you feel this way, but it does feel like this election. It feels like that for every election, but this election is the most important election in American history. When someone says that, I know why I say it. Maybe I'll explain why I say it. I say it because obviously we have chaos breaking out overseas, and we have, of course, the runner up being tried like 5 times already, a criminal trial taking place in Manhattan, and you have elections that are not trusted by the people. Obviously, you have videos coming out, but then you have the other side. So the split divide feels like there is no gap. I mean, the gap is so big that there's no bridge that you could build to, like, before the election at least. So it feels like this election is so important because you just never know. Then you have the FBI, the DHS pointing out that, hey, we're probably going to have cyber attacks from the CPP, excuse me. And you have all these things happening. So it feels like the most important. What goes through your mind when someone says that? Do you just look at them like, you're silly? Like, this is every election. What do you think?
Yeah, this is not every election for sure, Lou, right? To your point. And what we're seeing here is basically going back to when Hillary Clinton was running for office and she undermined, I just lost his name, who was the old white guy from like Connecticut or whatever, Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders, yeah.
Bernie Sanders, right?
Socialist Bernie Sanders, yeah.
Yeah. So remember when the Democratic the Democratic National Convention admitted or was caught undermining Bernie Sanders' campaign in support of Hillary Clinton. When that story broke, which was what, 8 years ago now?
Around 8 years ago, yeah.
When that story broke, an important, that's kind of like the shot heard around the world, if you recall from like World War I. What happened in that moment was people started to wake up to the reality that our electoral cycle is not fair. Like, our election system is not free and fair. It's been manipulated, it's been gerrymandered, it's been manipulated and twisted and changed around so that it's anything but fair. And then we started to see this continuing like political polarization between left and right. And now the vast majority of Americans, Lou, you know this as well, the vast majority of Americans, we land somewhere in the center. Yeah. Maybe we have liberal ideals and we're conservative with our money. Or maybe we have conservative ideals, but we are still progressive in our core. The vast majority of Americans are not batshit crazy. They sit somewhere in the middle. But the problem is that the people who are batshit crazy are the ones who are speaking the loudest. They're the ones who are making media shows. They're the ones who are making movies. They're the ones who are getting up and spending their money on crazy ass candidates. So that drives this massive political divide. So now everybody who's of sound mind and body is watching this craziness play out, and they're starting to think that maybe the whole world is really super divided. Maybe the United States is super divided, so divided that we're going to fight with each other in a civil war. In reality, that's just the biased voice of media making us afraid of something that we're not hearing, because we're not hearing the more rational voice.
Yeah.
Because that rational voice doesn't sell. But my point is, this is the most important election that we've seen in the last 3 or 4 elections.
Coming from you are saying that.
But here's what's mind-boggling, Lou. This is not the most important election that is yet to happen.
Oh, wow.
Right? We probably have another 2 or 3 election cycles after this where the stakes will get even higher with each consecutive electoral cycle.
That just brought chills for me, hearing you say that. I thought you were going to brush it off, but wow, that just gave me the chills because obviously a lot of Americans are feeling that way as well. Like, man, like what is happening right now? There's like a shift in energy. So real quick, like what does it look like? Do we get an election this year? Your honest thoughts. Like the first thought that might come to your mind, do we get an election this year or maybe a catastrophic event? maybe war, maybe lockdowns? Like, what do you think is possible? I think a lot of things are possible.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of things are possible. But yes, I do think we see an election this year.
Okay.
I think the probability is much higher that we see an election this year. And I also think the probability is high that the election we see this year is an election that involves both Trump and Biden. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that 2 years after the winner is announced, they're still president, right? So Biden might win the presidency this year and then in 2 years be replaced by his vice president. Trump might win the presidency this year and then end up being tried in a federal court that pulls him out of the presidency 2 years after he's elected. We don't know, right? But what I do think is important is that whoever is elected this year, at the end of their next 4-year term, that election is going to be even more controversial and even more scary than what we're seeing right now. Because here's what's guaranteed to happen on November 12th.
Okay.
Right?
So,
yeah. Well, I don't know. Is it November 5th? Is that when we go to?
Yeah.
So here's what's guaranteed to happen on November 6th. 50% of the country is guaranteed to be pissed off. Half of the Senate and half of the Congress are going to accuse the other half of doing something illegal. And we're going to go into a 2-year cycle of threats for impeachment and investigations, and it's just going to go crazy, right? And on the backdrop of all this, we're going to continue to have war in Europe, war in the Middle East, expanding conflict, continued economic challenges in the United States. None of that's going away anytime soon. So what that means is American influence continues to degrade. So 4 years after this election, we will be even less influential in the world, and we will have to go to vote again.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, and a lot of people have been saying this, coming out and saying this, that America's influence is on decline. It's not on the rise as much as it was probably in the early, 80s, 70s, 90s,
sure,
right? You obviously have BRICS, right? The BRICS alliance. You have the dollar going down. You have trillions of dollars in debt. Do you think what does it look like for America if America isn't the most influential?
That's the scary question, man. That's why I'm less afraid of this election in 2024 and more afraid of what happens in 2028. Because right now, Americans have the benefit, you, me, and our parents and our brothers and sisters, even the poorest American still has the benefit of being part of the richest country in the world. And if we don't find a way to fix our internal politics, 4 years from now, we're all going to be less powerful because we're all going to be less influential, and we're all going to be that much poorer compared to our competitors. Like you said, the BRICS alliance is already outperforming the G7 countries in terms of purchase parity, which means all things being equal, if you're from a G7 country, you cannot buy as much stuff. You cannot afford as much stuff, cars, food, vacations, as if you're from a BRICS country. So the price parity is already swayed in favor of BRICS. GDP is also expected to go in favor of BRICS within the next 5 to 7 years, right? The United States is expected to be at near equality in terms of GDP growth with China by 2033.
Yeah.
If not behind China, right? That's less than 3 presidential elections from now, man. This election is scary. 3 elections from now is terrifying. We might be voting a president into office in 12 years based on whether or not they get along with China. That's nuts, dude.
That is insane. Now, I want to ask you an inside question. I don't know what I mean by that, but follow me if you can here, guys, and Andrew. Was this and is this a self-inflicted wound, or from the inside, was this an attack by lobbying, or was this self-inflicted, or was there other central or three-letter agencies around the world, other than the CIA, was this some type of play by those people? Or do we think too far, or do we think we're so special that those people even want to do that to us? Or was this just self-inflicted, that we are in this position because of us?
No, it's a mix of both, man. It's a mix of both, right? Just like, if you think about it, anytime you get sick, it's a mix of both not being hygienic enough, you didn't wash your hands enough, and now you introduced a virus. But once that virus got into your body, it took advantage of your body's already existing weaknesses, right? So we are definitely seeing the perfect storm of a few different things. First, we as Americans have decoupled ourselves from the rest of the world. We talk about the American experience. We worry about the United States. The vast majority of Americans don't really pay attention to anything happening in the world. We don't pay attention to foreign policy, right? Like, nobody was thinking about Palestine October 6th. Nobody was thinking about Ukraine right before Russia invaded, right? Nobody cares about the world if you're an American, because you're so busy being one of the members of the wealthiest countries in the world, right? So you're worried about what's on Netflix, and you're worried about your job, and you're worried about, where you're going to get laid next. That's what we think about all the time.
That's like the American thing to do.
And guess what the rest of the world wishes they could do?
That.
Yes, exactly right. You know what every Indian in Mumbai wishes they could do? Watch TV and think about where they're going to get laid. If that was everybody's problems, if that was your biggest problems, the whole world would be a much happier place. But we are the ones that get that experience because we're the richest country in the world. Everybody else has to deal with surviving. So while we've been distracted with our wealth since about 1981, right? Since we've been on that economic boom, every other country, every other government of the world has been trying to find a way to influence and instigate and degrade American capability. So I don't just mean China and Cuba and Russia. I mean, even our closest allies, the French. France is one of the biggest counterintelligence threats to the United States in the economic and corporate intelligence world. They steal our corporate secrets all the time. The Israelis steal American military secrets all the time, right? So even our closest allies, the Germans, we were spying during the Obama administration. He was caught spying on the Chancellor of Germany. It caused a major issue. And that was just 2010, right? So we are seeing what happens when we become ignorant of what's happening around us. All of our friends and enemies all start to focus their efforts on degrading our capabilities. Meanwhile, we're distracted by not improving our capabilities. Imagine the pro athlete who reaches like the pinnacle of his career and then just stops going to the gym. He's not going to be the star athlete for much longer. That's essentially what happened to us. So yes, it's partly self-inflicted, but it's also the fact that our enemies have been sharpening their swords for 20 years, 30 years, waiting
on that moment. So now that we bring that up, and I love that answer because it gives me perspective, really, and it lets me know I'm not alone feeling that as well. Let's get to the border crisis stuff, right? Because I think a lot of people weren't really thinking about the border, like you said, like October 6th, people weren't thinking about it. October 7th, everybody's thinking about it, obviously. But then, the border situation, right? This is something that maybe the Trump administration, they campaigned on this stuff. They campaigned on even the CIA. They campaigned on going private sectors, right? Instead of going for this. So they the Trump administration campaigned on a lot of things that woke a lot of people up. Let's just go with that. But when you look at today, what's going on, and you look at the tensions all around the world, and you look at these laws like sanctuary city laws, where they come in seeking asylum, and then through sanctuary city laws they can't be deported, right? You see Venezuelans, you see a bunch of course now Africans, Chinese nationals. Trump even came out. He was like, "What's going on with all these Chinese nationals? Are they building an army?" That type of stuff. And I'm like, why would Trump? That's a wild thing to say, but it's like there were a lot of Chinese nationals so I want to get to the self-inflicted. Let's go back there. The border situation, like if we know that our enemies are like not too far off, or they're wandering off, or we know that Iran or Israel, there's tensions in the Middle East. We know there's tensions all around the world. How in the world could the United States allow that to happen? Is it deeper than what we see, or is it just politicians messing up?
Yeah, so
trying to be too nice.
No. There's a couple of things, right? So keep in mind that we are a country, but we are a country of independent states. So we have a federal law infrastructure, but then each state has their own state law infrastructure. And then inside of state laws, you have county laws, municipal laws, and city laws. So compare that to China. Nothing overpowers the Chinese Communist Party. So if Xi Jinping passes a policy, he can literally force that policy down to the smallest village. But here in the United States, it's not that way. Federal law can be one thing, state law can be something totally different. So when you talk about immigration, and when you talk about the larger challenge that's happening right now, independent state governments, consider Florida and Ron DeSantis, right? Yeah. Independent states disagree with the direction the federal government is going in. Well, guess what that means those independent states can do? Pass their own legislation. That's completely different from federal legislation. And that's why you have this situation where Trump in Florida would be safe, but Trump in New York, a liberal state,
is different. Yeah,
he's in a courtroom, right? And even as we watch this happen, it starts to make us have to ask some really uncomfortable questions, Lou. What are our individual rights as Americans if our legal freedoms are different from state to state? How is it that if I do something in Florida, I don't have to worry about any legal ramifications, but if I do the same thing in New York, now I can end up going to jail?
Yeah, like if you carry open carry, or you buy a gun in Florida, is different from, obviously, like if I get caught with a gun here, you get 3 to 5 years in in state, prison or whatever,
yeah,
Rikers Island.
And so a gun is an easy one, right? Because guns are such a hot topic. People freak out about guns all the time. Let's just talk about a freaking stick, dude, a baton. If you carry a baton in your backpack, just a hard stick in Texas, you're fine. Somebody mugs you, you can defend yourself with a baton, no harm, no foul. If you carry a baton in California, you can be arrested for the intent to carry out assault with a deadly weapon.
Yeah, it's pretty.
And that's just a stick, dude. That's not even a gun. There's no registration, no background check, no nothing needed. You literally can't carry the same things in your backpack between state to state. So what we're seeing on a large scale, on a national scale, is a symptom of what we're also seeing on a micro scale. Just like you and I can't behave the same way between Arkansas and Connecticut, you and I are going to see different court systems in both states. We're going to be tried by by judges who have different opinions in both states. When you start to project that onto a federal issue like immigration, Florida doesn't want to take immigrants. New York wants to take immigrants. So New York and the federal liberal government force Florida and Texas to take immigrants. Well, Texas and Florida are like, you can't force us to do something against our state law. So we're going to change our state law and we're going to fund the deportation of these immigrants to your state, which then causes a crisis in the liberal states, right?
In those areas, yeah.
And then what do they say? And then the federal government that aligns itself currently with liberal states blames Texas and Florida. Well, if we had a conservative government right now, they would blame New York and Connecticut and California. So we are literally, it feels like middle school, dude, because it's just as ridiculous as middle school ever was.
It is. And funny that you mentioned that. I just saw Brandon Johnson, mayor of Chicago, and then, of course, Mayor Adams, mayor of New York City. They're coming out and they're saying that, oh, it's because we're black that they're sending these migrants here and trying to mess us up. Obviously the race thing plays into it, but people buy that. People buy what they're selling. And I think that speaks to the psychology of or how much people want that to be the truth. I want to speak to that. Like when you hear a United States mayor or two or three of them say that, oh, they're sending these migrants to these liberal areas because we're black. Like that really does cause division because it makes people say, oh, that's why. And it's not because of the laws, or it's not because of, so what do you think about that?
So here's the thing that's really kind of twisted, right? Human beings, the way that our brains work, your brain, my brain, every brain of everybody listening right now, the way our brains work is we want simple answers to complex questions. Yeah. It's what we desire, right? Just think about if you're a parent, or if you're an aunt or an uncle, if you've ever talked to a child, children will ask these complicated questions, right? Where do babies come from? And we always want to give them a very simple, basic answer, right? Well, when a mommy and a daddy love each other, a stork gives you a baby, whatever, right? So the reason that we do that to children is because that's what we in our brains want ourselves as adults. When you go and talk to your boss and you ask your boss for a raise, you just want the answer yes. But instead you get some answer about like, well, I don't know, I've got to review your performance metrics and I've got to see how you've been. And there's some other people who are in line. Like, we don't like complexity. We like simplicity. Well, the problem is that politicians understand how the human brain works and they manipulate their messaging. You got two things at play here, messaging and narrative. Messaging is something that you do that triggers emotion. Narrative is something that you build with multiple emotional messages. So you hear people all the time talk about the public narrative, the government narrative. They're not necessarily wrong, except that what they're actually talking about is messaging. So when you've got mayors who are claiming that something is race-based, they're creating a message. That message is emotional because people get very emotional about race. But overall, what they're trying to do is paint a narrative. And that narrative is something that is more logical and rational, but built on an emotional foundation. So they might say, immigrants are being sent here because we're black. That's a emotional message. But the narrative overall is that there are other states in our country that are not being responsible. So now, if you hear enough times the emotional message, you're going to land on the conclusion, oh yeah, Florida and Texas are crazy. Those states are irresponsible. Those states are not irresponsible, and they have a message happening in their state, just like you have a message happening in your state, right? It's unfortunate because race is a very simple solution to a complex question. So politicians will constantly lean on that to make a simple case that is not actually accurate. Right? The problems that we have in the United States are only fractionally based on the color of our skin. The real thing that makes some people suffer and some people successful in the United States is how much money they make. It's, a rich black person, a rich Puerto Rican, a rich white guy, they're in good hands in the United States. Yeah. A poor Puerto Rican, a poor white guy, a poor African American, you're screwed.
Do you think, okay, do people vote with their emotions?
The average person. Absolutely.
I've noticed that maybe they're using these tactics.
Get that. Could you try again?
There's I don't know, bro. What's going on here? Did you guys hear that? That was
listening in.
What is going on? Whoa, dog. That was creepy. All right. Does Trump do that as well? I've noticed that Trump kind of does that. I think every politician does that to a degree, and it works. It gets people emotional. It gets people fired up to go to the polls.
Yeah, here's the difference. The difference is that politicians handle messaging like politicians.
Okay.
Trump handles messaging like a business person.
That is true.
You know what I'm saying? So it's the difference between a church putting out an advertisement and Nike putting out an advertisement. Completely different, right? The church's advertisement is not sexy. It's very basic. It's basically, hey, go to church or you go to hell. That's how politicians market themselves, right? Vote for me or go to hell.
Yeah.
Where, Trump, he markets himself like Nike. Sexy women, sweat, high-speed shoes, strong men, right? Winning races, celebrations. Everybody wants to be part of that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you can see that they're both using the same techniques, but they use them with different levels of sophistication. Because at the end of the day, the unenviable truth is that human beings, when you vote, voting is no different than making a purchase. Just like when you go to the store and you pick one one brand of coffee over another brand of coffee, you're voting with your pocketbook, right? Your ballot card is your credit card. When we go to the polls, that's all we're doing is we're just buying our favorite coffee at that moment. And for politicians and business people alike, they know if they market themselves well enough, then by the time you walk in and step up to the cash register, you're gonna buy whichever candidate you want most at that moment.
Speaking about Trump, were you in service? That's the question. Were you in service at CIA, not the CIA? See, I was getting ready to go CIA. This is what happens when I start studying people. Like the CIA. Were you like CIA at that time, or were you? I don't know if you could say that. Or were you in service? Let's just go with service. Like, were you in the military or whatever during Trump's first run?
So I left CIA in 2014, which was the last year, 2008, 2012, 2016. So I left 2 years before the 2016 election. I left under the Barack Obama administration. And then what was beneficial for me, my wife is also CIA. My wife and I were both at CIA together. And when we left in 2014, we had the benefit of being outside while we watched what happened at CIA when Donald Trump took over. Because we still had friends and close friends and peers who were at CIA during the takeover, during the transition. And it was wild to see, because from the outside looking in, it makes total sense. Like the CIA started questioning Trump's presidency. Well, the CIA's only job is to serve at the pleasure of the president. So when they start accusing the president of being a Russian plant, what do you think the president's going to do? And that's exactly why he stopped funding CIA and started funding private intelligence instead. But that's not nefarious activity. That's just common sense.
They tried to paint that way, though. Obviously, the mainstream media does what they do. They try to paint that as, they try to paint all his moves as he's trying to overthrow this, he's trying to overthrow that. But really, you're saying, especially being a part of it before, you're saying that was a smart move, especially with the way they were coming after him. And that changed the game for forever, technically, right? Because he just showed what you can actually do.
Exactly. So CIA is just a service provider for the president. So instead of thinking them as CIA and the president, you have a bathroom. The plumber who works on your bathroom is a service provider for you. So what happens if the plumber starts giving you shit and doesn't want to plumb your bathroom anymore? What are you going to do?
You're fired.
I mean, come on. This dude was the face of The Apprentice. You think he's going to have a hard time saying, okay, you don't want to do what I tell you to do? I'm going to stop funding you and I'm going to find a replacement. What shook the American people, really what shook the international intelligence community, was when they realized how quickly they could be replaced.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Right?
That is wow. That is crazy, only because that kind of applies to a lot of government, or a lot of let's just go. Who else would you say that applies to, right? Besides CIA, like FBI?
You name it, man. Like private law enforcement.
Yeah. You
got private prisons already, private education already, right? Like there is no government institution. The government has always been safe, sitting on its ivory tower, because it's hard to replace a long-term institution. So if you go all the way back to 9/11, right? September 11th, the day before September 11th, September 10th, 2001, CIA was basically free to do whatever it wanted to do. It didn't have any government oversight. It didn't have to report to anyone, right? It was an independent agency reporting directly to the president. Well, then September 11th happened. And then everybody started wondering, how did CIA miss this? And then in 2003, the 9/11 Commission was complete. And what they found is that CIA and FBI dropped the ball on this very important.
They had some type of info, right?
Correct. And the reason that they dropped the ball was because both of those two agencies weren't sharing information, and they were both still focused on this boogeyman of communism from the Cold War. So even though the Cold War ended in 1989, from 1989 to 2001, CIA had still not really changed the way it was doing operations. So now here is the introduction of Al-Qaeda, an international, transnational terrorist organization that just killed almost 3,000 Americans, right? The 9/11 Commission basically said, hey, CIA, FBI, and everybody in the intelligence community, you need to change the way you do business, and you need to change it immediately. And then the federal government was infused with trillions of dollars to make this change, this pivot to focus on terrorism. Well, guess who filled in that gap? It wasn't like you can hire 10,000 new government employees in a week, but you know what you can do? You can hire 10,000 corporate contractors in a week. And that's when Booz Allen and Khaki and all these other companies took off and basically became the foundation of private intelligence. So when Donald Trump took office in 2016, he already knew that whole infrastructure was in place. So now it's just a matter of taking money and directing it into the private sector instead of into the federal sector. You can do that with health and human services. There's private hospitals and public hospitals, private schools and public schools. You can do that in any industry. In the country of Argentina, they elected a new president. That president was elected on the promise that he was going to privatize every element of government.
Javier Milei, yeah.
People thought he was crazy.
Yeah.
6 months later, the dude's a fucking genius.
So how is it, right? This is what's confusing to me, right? Because I've been into politics for a few years now, and I wasn't into it before. I was coming from a very lefty standpoint as far as where I got my info or where I've heard these things at. But when I speak to people like you, experienced veterans, people who are in it, you were obviously in it, and you come out and you say, well, people like Javier Milei, like, yo, this is like genius stuff. Like, but then the rest of the world paints these people as Trump-connected dictators or Russia. Like, what is it about the mainstream media that they lean so left? Like, what's happening? Like, what's this shift that's going on? Because it's not just Argentina, it's also El Salvador, right? This guy comes and he's like, yo, like, we want Bitcoin, like, we want like all these different things, and they just get labeled, dictators and bad people. Why is that?
So there's a couple things at play, right? So first of all, left-leaning media
but they're heavy though. They're not regular. Like, they are CNN, ABC, Joy Reid, Jake Tapper, all Anderson Cooper, like all these big names. They're all just leaning that way. Fox News is the only maybe right-leaning one that I know.
And that's what we're seeing, right, Lou? What you're seeing is that mainstream media, especially in the United States, mainstream media is a business. That means it has to have a funding source. It has to have somebody to buy its ad space. It has to have somebody to buy the paper. So just like politicians, mainstream media has to sell their product. Every time you click on a headline, that's you voting for a certain headline over another headline. So in the race for clicks and in the race for attention, mainstream media has had to take these very biased stances. So mainstream media is they're not incentivized to tell you and me the truth. They're not incentivized to take a middle ground, even though what you and I are looking for is a middle ground. That's not what the media is getting. The media is incentivized to amplify the voice of the far left and the far right, which is why you have Fox News, sometimes really far right.
Super far right, yeah.
And your CNNs of the world and your BBCs of the world really far left, right? Instead, there's just a lack of people in the middle. Even like the New York Times, which has for a long time been a neutral newspaper, even now it's labeled as center left. And going back to the reason why, so the media is incentivized to create news that's polarizing. Well, who is it that clicks on a free media source? Somebody who doesn't have a lot of money. Remember how we were talking about how the biggest problem is the socioeconomic divide?
Yes.
Well, guess what? The poorer you are in general, the more liberal you lean. So now you've got liberal news sources looking to satisfy poor liberal people, or young liberal people who come from wealthy families, because that's another thing that happens, right? How often do you find like a conservative parent with their liberal college kid?
Yeah.
Right? Because that person is still so ideologically independent, they haven't actually tasted the realities of real life yet. So then you've got these liberal news sources that realize that just to stay alive, they have to publish and print liberal progressive media to a very specific demographic, even though when that demographic grows up, gets married, has a baby, and builds a business, guess what they start voting? Conservative.
So you're saying that it's getting to the point where they're so desperate. Obviously, they're losing influence, just like America's losing influence. But the people of America seem to be losing trust in what the mainstream media says. They're to hold on to whatever legacy they have, or to hold on to more clicks, or to stay afloat. They're willing to just say, F it, like, fuck it, let's just start a civil war.
Why anything? Not? Because at least, even if the world is burning,
like they got it on camera.
Newspapers are selling, right? So that's what they're looking for.
It's funny you said that, because earlier today, I told you before the show, if for people watching this, I will be premiering this over time. People will be clicking this. There was an incident in 130th Leonard Street, which is where Trump's trial is taking place. A little outside of that is where Trump supporters gather. This was like trial day 4. There was a guy who went out there. He was holding a sign that said Trump and Biden cool, like Trump and Biden are going to get together and do a coup and fascist and all this crazy stuff. And he burnt himself alive. But when you see, there was videos of people taken of him, right? The people were taking videos, but if you see, photographers ran right into it. CNN ran right into it. Fox News ran right into it, filming this guy being burnt alive. And I even reported on it. So it's to that point where like they're just like, yo, we got to get this footage. We got to get this content. This is what's going to get us to that, or keep us afloat. Like, it feels like the desperation is there, and they're willing to, do whatever it takes and post whatever it takes. They don't care. They have no worry in their hearts for the consequences that it may cause other people to really take that. I think it's ironic that they're taking the pictures of maybe someone they drove to that point.
Yeah.
Right?
So in the 1970s, there was a law in place that made it so that news providers had to provide free and fair opinions on both sides. So if you wanted to be a news agency or news media, you had to follow this law. That law was put in place in the 1950s. Well, it expired in the 1970s, and it was never renewed. So starting in the 1980s to today, there was no requirement for a news agency to provide free and fair, equitable news.
Yeah.
It opened the door for them to create completely biased, totally one-sided, inaccurate news. There was no legal consequence anymore. And that was the birth of the 24-hour news cycle, right? That's where CNN came out of. So what you're seeing, like the example that you just shared, as sad as it is to think that a human life was lost like that, right? There's going to be a headline tomorrow in a progressive newspaper that says, crazy Trump supporters said Biden was going to stage a coup and burned himself alive. And then you're going to have a Fox News headline that says,
you're so good.
Crazy Biden supporter.
Why are you so good at this?
Burned himself alive, right? That's what's going to happen.
You're so good at this because that's what I was talking about. That's why I went live, because I was like, hey, let's get the real story as soon as possible, because I've been out there covering this stuff. And like you said, that the first thing they were trying to do was say that it was a Trump supporter. But then the sign came up, and the sign was being held up by the kid, and it was a sign that said, Trump and Biden are going to stage a coup. If I could find this sign real quick so I could show the people, maybe on the screen, or maybe it'll be on the screen now. But yeah, that you're right. I think that it's important, to get ahead, or to try to get it as far as, at least for me, I try to get the real news possible. Like when I filmed Trump, but I'm noticing these things, and I hate that, because I would say I'm supporting Trump in 2024, but also covering him as much as I can, getting ahead of news and trying to defeat. Like I find myself trying to defeat the mainstream media. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that happened with me was that I went viral for a video recently, like a few days ago, where I was filming Trump, and there were cheers, right? There were cheers. People were excited. The mainstream media then grabs mic footages, and then they start saying Trump was being booed. And I'm like, wow, there's just like, this is just where we're at. Like, and I get it because the right does the same thing. The right, trust me, they do the same thing. But real quick, I want to stick on this this situation because so is the CIA is CIA back on? Are they so they're being funded by the Biden administration this whole time, or are they still going private sector?
So CIA is tied to the federal budget, without a doubt, right? But the oversight committees within the Congress and the White House have the ability to kind of turn up or turn down how much funding goes to CIA. They're also able to turn up and turn down how much money is spent on private contracts to support intelligence. So what you saw with President Trump was that he turned up the dial to increase external funding for private intelligence and turned down the dial on funding them internally, essentially redirecting money from the federal government and putting it into the private companies, private organizations. The Biden administration has reversed that a little bit. But here's the thing, the little dirty secret that the Biden administration never wants to admit to. In many ways, all they've done is continued Trump-level intelligence initiatives and just changed their name. Trump was the one that turned on everybody's attention to what's happening in China, right? Trump was the one that started putting in restrictions on Chinese people, Chinese companies, Chinese trade. Well, the Biden administration continued the same policies. All they did was cancel the old name and introduce it with a new name. So in many ways, what Trump was doing in a national security direction was sound. It was all sound judgment carried on by the Biden administration, but they don't want to admit to that, right? Really, where it comes down to where things are very different between Trump and Biden is in the economics of the world and how economic stimulus is used inside the United States. Trump wants to encourage more business activity, and business activity will stimulate the government. Biden wants to include more stimulus direct to consumer. So each individual will put more money into the country. What we've seen, though, is that over the last 3.5 years, really wealthy corporations, those keep becoming profitable and those executives keep making more money, but smaller businesses and smaller corporations are suffering, making less money with less profit margin, because when you give ignorant masses a blank check, they're going to spend their money on whoever spends the most marketing dollars. Well, who spends more marketing dollars, Whole Foods or McDonald's? McDonald's, obviously, right? So then you end up funding more corporations and killing more. Not that Whole Foods is a small business, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Your healthy lifestyles type of alternatives don't benefit when you have economic stimulus. They benefit when there are tax incentives for companies who are doing good things for good people.
Now, in closing, I just want to ask you maybe a few more questions here about CIA. And there is a trust level. It is not maybe just CIA. It's more like central intelligence agencies, or when you look at what's going on in America now, the narrative to me that I hear mostly is these central intelligence agencies are not for the people. They're power tripping. They're serving another master instead of serving the people. I don't know if you can answer this, but do you think that's true? Do you think that the CIA and FBI, DHS, DEA, like, do you think that they're not serving the people as much as they should, or they're serving more of lobbying or more, other interests other than the people? Like they'll violate somebody, just to keep, doing what they're doing, or maybe it's a political move, or maybe it's a move of more power. What do you think?
So it's really important to understand that when you become a sworn federal officer, whether you're a military officer, FBI agent, national security, national intelligence officer, CIA, FBI, I said FBI, Secret Service, NGA, Health and Human Services, you name it, right? Department of Education. When you swear your oath, you swear your alliance to supporting the Constitution. That is a document that is for the people. So the men and women who dedicate their lives to serving the American people They are not even within question. They are serving the American people. If anything, they keep serving, even though they know that the government they represent is ridiculous. But they keep striving every day because they want to support the American people. They want to support their mother, their father, their neighbor, their uncle, their brother, the person who grew up with them down the street. They want to have that impact on the everyday American. Don't think for a second that the problem with CIA is the CIA officers. Don't think for a second that the problem with the military or FBI or first responders or even your local police force, don't think for a second there's something wrong with the police officer. There isn't. What's happening is that when you get to the senior echelons of government bureaucracy, that's where all the confusion takes place. Because now, you know who's in charge of CIA? Somebody who the president decides independently to appoint to that position. You know who's in charge of police precincts and police districts? Somebody the district attorney assigns. How does the district attorney get to that position? Because somebody else chooses to put them there, right? The men and women who dedicate their lives to protect us are beyond question. They are awesome people. Do they make mistakes? Yes. Are they flawed? Absolutely. You would be flawed too if you literally put your country ahead of your own family, right? So these people are making massive sacrifices just to keep us safe every day. But they have to serve with professional silence and professional grace. So they never defend themselves. And all the narrative that comes out from the media attacking police officers, attacking CIA officers and FBI officers, they don't defend themselves because these are silent sentinels who knew from the beginning that they were going into a thankless job that had to be done to keep Americans safe. I am beyond grateful to the brothers and sisters who are still in service to the United States and our Constitution because they're the ones giving me the freedom to run a business instead. Yeah. They're the ones who give me the ability to step out of the shadows and be a voice that I hope makes them proud.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I feel that same way about officers, right? When I was growing up, obviously I didn't grow up in the 90s when, Ice Cube came out with F the Police song. And obviously that was like a revolution between the police departments and then all around the country, especially in cities, and then the people. That like there was a separation because the song come out like, whoa, so to me, I don't think of at least because the only cops, I don't see the CIA, I don't see the FBI as much, but I do see NYPD. And I know that most of these guys, they're just like me. They're Dominicans, they're Puerto Ricans, they're just trying to feed their families and they're just trying to do their best. But then you look at the behind the scenes or the people calling the shots, or there could be cynical things that do take place or the bad representation. And I definitely understand what you're saying. And I think another thing is like people don't get to defend themselves. People don't, because they obviously don't want to come out to the world and it's all classified anyways. So, but you're saying that the individuals, you are a representative of the individuals. You're fighting for those people. Now, the other stuff that happens in between that it's other stuff because they came out. A report came out with Harriet, a congresswoman. She came out. She reported that the CIA was allegedly spying using AI bank accounts. Right, like this is a report that came out, and I was like, I do have Everyday Spy coming on the show. Like when you hear stuff like that, are you disappointed by the fact that that's coming out, or are you like, I don't know if that's true. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. How do you feel about that? Because I think that's just drawing the separation between. I think the influence, right, that the media has, the people have, but also maybe the CIA or maybe FBI or whatever. When you see FBI coming in and they're like arresting different people for the J6 stuff, and then you're like, okay, I get you're arresting the rioters, but you're arresting somebody that was just walking around, and you're giving them 5, 6, 7 years. Whoa. So people are confused, like, oh, is this like political tactics being used against the right? So I don't know. People are feeling like victims. Some people are feeling like they're doing the right thing. Where do you stand on that? Do you think there's some power being abused as far as politics goes? Like when you hear stuff like that?
I think the biggest thing that we're seeing right now, Lou, is confusion. You've got people who are trying to do the right thing and they're trying to exercise the rights that 2 years ago they knew they had.
Yeah.
But now the lines are getting blurred between what rights we really do have and what rights are up for negotiation. So people trying to do the right thing the right way are ending up being told that they're doing the wrong thing, and then they're paying a massive penalty for it, which then sends a message to all the other people out there who are even thinking about whether or not to exercise their rights. And now they're being intimidated out of exercising their rights, which for some people, when you're being intimidated, that makes you just cower away. But for other people, when you're being intimidated, it makes you want to fight even harder.
Yeah.
Right. So I think what we're seeing right now, it isn't some sort of master plan. It isn't the deep state. It isn't some sort of conspiracy. It is an evolution. And the United States, and especially the federal government, has to decide what it's going to be in the future. And because the people who comprise the federal government are people that you and me vote into office, the real responsibility for a change in the future falls to people like us. We have to make sure that we don't let career politicians stay in office. Congressmen who are there for 16 years, what the hell? Like, that's not what we were supposed to be. So, I mean, there's mass confusion. As
you're saying, it starts there. It starts with people, because I noticed that there was a percentage of 20. There was it threw me off. I learned about it yesterday. 25% of Republicans only vote in primaries. Like, they don't, like, people don't come out to vote in primaries, which is like the most important thing, right? Because you're voting people out. I don't know if it's quarterly, but you're having elections consistently with congressmen and women, assemblymen, senators, and different things like that. People like actually have to come out and vote these people out or vote for somebody new. You just don't even care about that. And when I learned that the number was like 25% of like Republicans in certain states, only 25 Republicans, and then like Democrats is like high. Like they're on that. They're like, yo, we're gonna stay in power because we're smarter, we're better. I don't know. It feels like they're just like really dominating the game of like primaries. All right, I don't want to keep you on too long. I do want to get I want to get to stuff that you got going on with yourselves, but I want to ask you for a prediction. Now, I don't know if you do these or not. A prediction as to, I want to do like 3 or 4 predictions, maybe back to back. Who wins the 2024 election?
That is such a hard prediction, man. I can see it going either way. I think that there's a better likelihood of Trump winning the election if he wins the lawsuit in New York. If New York goes well for Trump, I see a very strong chance that he takes the presidency.
This might be the only trial that actually happens this year or before the election. And then other ones will happen. Okay. So, that's a good solid answer. Still you're doing CIA stuff where you're not giving the full blown answer. But you know, we appreciate you on the show regardless. Does America make it past 2030? Because I saw on a video that went extremely viral where I'm not sure if you actually said it or maybe it was a title, but maybe leaving the United States is a good idea. Does the United States make it past 2025 as far as what we've known? So
the United States will continue to be for a very long time.
But the United States we know today, like in 2020.
But the United States as a superpower, the United States as the only world superpower, I don't see that happening past 2033. I think by 2033, we are either one of multiple superpowers or we have lost the lead position in the race by 2033, which is why I plan to leave the United States with my family before 2030.
Really?
I want my children to have opportunities that the United States simply isn't going to have anymore by the time 2030 hits.
Boy, you're going to make some patriots really mad at you watching this.
Yeah, I get it. So here's the deal, man. If you put yourself in the shoes of the American revolutionaries, right? I don't know if you've ever done this exercise. Here's a quick mental exercise, Lou, and I know that we're out of time, right?
Let's do it.
I'm a 44-year-old husband, business owner, and father with 2 children. When I think about what the American revolutionaries had to do when they resisted British rule, they had to go to war against the world's largest navy, the world's only superpower, and their own colonial father, right? That was almost guaranteed to lose. The American Revolution was almost guaranteed to be a failure for the American people. But there were men and women who went to fight even in the face of incredible odds that they would lose. And they lost everything along the way. They lost husbands, wives, brothers, fathers, everything. Right? But they fought anyways. When I ask myself, if I had been in their shoes, would I have gone to war? Would I have picked up a musket and gone to war with the British? I don't think the answer is yes, man.
Wow.
I think those people were way more courageous than me. I think they were way more dedicated and faithful than me. I think those people had a vision that far exceeds my vision. I'm a very pragmatic, practical person. I'm just trying to keep 2 kids healthy and happy. I'm trying to keep a marriage on the rails, and I'm trying to build a business that makes a difference for the people that it touches. To risk all of that for a dream that was almost impossible to achieve, I don't think I would have been as brave as those people, dude. And when I realized that, it was a humbling and sad moment for me, but it's a moment of truth, right? And I think that every patriot out there has to ask themselves the same question. You know what? If you're a patriot and a parent and a spouse, and you've got investments and who knows what, if you're trying to build a life, are you going to risk it all to support a federal government like we have right now? Or are you going to let that federal government figure their own shit out, and you're going to go off grid and hide out for a bit, and you'll come back after the craziness is over? Here's a question for you, Lou. What are you going to do, dude? You going to pick up a musket? Or are you going to go sit out the fight?
You're making me really think about this a lot. You're making me think about it, man, because it does feel like we're getting there. But here's the question that comes to my mind. Where, other than here? Where, other than what I've known my whole life, right? Like, this is what I love. I love this. This is what I love. This is what I'm so afraid of going away. Like, Vivek Ramaswamy made a good point, whether people like him or not. I love that guy because he's like, of course, he comes from immigrant parents, but he makes these points of the founding fathers. Like, I've never heard anybody speak about the founding fathers the way this guy speaks about the founding fathers. He speaks about them like, yo, these ideas these guys had, the way they fought, the people that fought for this country, like what we have, the Constitution and everything, to see it go in this direction is exactly what they did not want. Because they wanted freedom. They wanted the Second Amendment. If you look at the Second Amendment, doesn't even exist in certain states, right? I didn't even grow up knowing that there was a Second Amendment. So the question the answer to your question is, it's tough, right? It's some deep, thinking that I will have to do, right? I'm 27 years old now. I look older than you at this point. It's been stressful for us. I think I'm like the last year of like Gen Z, 97. So it's been a stressful time for all of us because we went through the pandemic, we went through all these things, but we saw and we see what the United States is turning into. And so that's unfortunate. So my question to you will be, where? Options. What are the options? What do you think? Like, obviously, I don't want you to tell me where you're going to go, but like, where better than the United States, or where more safer than the United States as far as Europe?
So it's important to understand, right? We're asking 2 different questions.
Okay.
I don't think there's any place better than the United States.
Okay, you're right. I'm not trying to trap you.
But I'm not looking to go someplace better. I am specifically asking myself the question, where will my children have more opportunity? Because the direction the United States is going right now, by the time my son is 18, he might get called to go fight a war in freaking some country that we have no beef with at all, because some president is deciding that it's a chance for us to make democracy sound like something, some sort of ideal that's worth killing American soldiers over, right? The global war on terror was 20 years of sons and daughters being killed in pursuit of what? Right? In pursuit of some presidential ambition. So when my kids are turning, it's my job as a parent to make sure that they have the most opportunity to make the life they want to build when they become adults. So I'm not trying to find a place better than the United States. There isn't any place better than the United States, but there are places where individuals have more freedom right now than we have in the United States. And if you are an American citizen in a foreign country, you get all the benefits of being an American and all the benefits of being in a different country. So where's my short list? Spain, Portugal, Croatia, Costa Rica,
really,
Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, Thailand, Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. These are countries where being an American citizen gives you huge opportunities because the countries like American citizens and they love American dollars. But then the countries themselves, you don't fall under the rule of law as tightly under those countries as you do under the United States. So you can get residency, you can start a business, you can grow a family, and you can buy property, right? How many Americans in the United States can't even buy property in the United States?
This is a fascinating conversation. I am so fascinated by what you're saying, because for the last 2 years, I think my base is they love America. They love the idea. They love America. But the question is America just an idea now? Is that America just an ideology that was once implemented, or is just the foundation of what it's creating now, which is just something far beyond differently than that? Like,
America has always been an idea. It's always been an idea. And that's why Texans can sit in Texas and feel like they're true Americans. And New Yorkers can sit in New York and feel like they're true Americans, even though they couldn't have more different ideologies.
Yeah.
Because America is an ideology. The freedom that we're pursuing is individual. It's independent. The magic of our founding fathers was that they crafted the life they wanted for themselves. Every one of us has the ability to create the life we want for ourselves. We don't have to have a certain passport to do that. We don't have to work for a certain company to do that. We don't have to subscribe to the laws of a certain land in order to do that. America goes with us wherever we choose to go. That's why so many immigrants constantly dream of America. And then when they come here only to end up disappointed because they don't know what it's like to actually be American in your brain.
Shit. Hey, this is it's fucking me up a little bit, man. It's deep, deep thinking. Deep thinking in the sense of like what the future might hold. But I think you hit something that really struck in my heart, is the war on terror, right? You know of so many, and you were active at that time, so you know of deployments, or you became close with people that were, all around, right? The Middle East and what we know of, have we ever had a draft in America?
Vietnam
draft, right? And a lot of Americans are feeling this way today with what they're seeing. Like if Iran strikes back, right, which I'm expecting, or maybe they just downplayed what Israel did, so they don't have to strike back. I don't know what the thought is there, but a lot of people, especially me, I'm like, yo, like a draft is possible, and like a draft under this administration, like, and you're right, like to a degree, is like, yo, has America turned into that? Where like you're thinking of your sons and daughters getting drafted. Like, whoa, like we haven't had that since Vietnam. Like,
Vietnam wasn't that long ago, brother. Think about that too. So last thing, because I have to bounce on you to go to another.
Okay. Yes.
Think about this for a second. Vietnam happened in the 1970s. That was only 50 years ago. And before that, we had World War II in the 1950s, 20 years before that, right? The fact is that whether or not Iran strikes back, the United States military has failed to meet its recruitment quotas for the last 4 years. Men and women are no longer volunteering for the military because they know that that's a bad idea. They know that there's other opportunities besides being part of the military. Well, what happens when the military doesn't have enough people volunteering for the military? Guess what they're going to do next?
Draft.
I can't let my kids be the first in line to do that unless they want to. If they want to volunteer, then God bless them, right? They will get my support. But what I can't do is ignore the fact that our country is going in a direction that is not valuing individual freedoms right now. Right now, our country is going in a direction where it is legislating the life and how we live our life every day. It is changing the laws depending on whether or not it wants you to go to jail or not, right? Like the country that we live in is not the country our forefathers wanted. It's a very different animal.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was a pleasure. I hope we could do this again one day. This was a really, really deep conversation. For me, this is one of the first deep convos you guys have seen me go through. Andrew, it's been an honor to have you on my show. Where can the people find you? What can the people do to go and click because I'll have all the links down in the description box below, but what do you have going on that the people should look forward to?
Absolutely. So Lou, anybody can find me at everydayspy.com, my homepage. You can find me on social media everywhere at everydayspy. And if you want to follow me and my podcast, you'll find my podcast in the description below. You'll also find it at the Everyday Spy podcast on all of your favorite podcast channels.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Andrew Bustamante and Lou Valentino, we are out. See you guys on our next one.